Okay. Ready? Chaim? You started again? Okay, so now we're holding chapter 3, right? Another L'chaim.
Okay.
But I don't think saying L'chaim on coffee counts as L'chaim. We might have to excommunicate you for.
It's fine. Did somebody else want a shot?
Yeah, maybe the Irish coffee. We'll give Michael J the benefit of the doubt. You okay? You falling asleep today?
I'm here with anything.
By the way,
Trying not to be bad mouth.
no, you can ask a question.
What
So
are we
the
He said whiskey. We just never bring it.
He's gonna have a jack.
If I'm
Whiskey.
so I'm gonna keep going while you guys drinking, which is good for me because
Whiskey.
less interruptions. But seriously, if you guys have
Finding
questions.
whiskey. We're changing the name.
I have a question.
You don't except for you. I'm kidding. Don't necessarily wait for me to stop for questions. You can interrupt me. Yeah, sorry.
I'm used to interrupting it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea of the soul and the
I didn't
levush.
say
Yeah.
anything with questions.
So the levush is again more not what it's what he turns it into, right?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
It's not what he's born with; it's what he turns it into.
No, he is born with it.
Right. But
He
he's
is born
born
with it.
with it.
So you have. So 1 second. Let me say it again. Maybe let's see if we're on the same page. So you have the potential of who you are, and you have your opportunity. You have your ability to express your potential. Your ability. Sorry, your potential and your character of your soul come from God. Your ability to express it come from your parents. Now, by the way,
So which one is the levush?
the ability to express it.
So the parents one.
Yes.
So
Now,
you
wait.
choose
Wait.
the levush.
We're not up to the choosing it. You don't choose that because if let's say your parents made a person's parents made bad choices, and it affects one second.
You can see some of the
Oh, yeah,
levush.
we're going to get more into this in chapter 3. But if a person's parents made poor choices in their education, in their conduct, and the guy wants to be a spiritual person, right? Wants to learn Torah, he's going to have a very, very hard time because the actions of his parents set him back. So this whole idea, fairness, the way your parents act affect you. That's I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality. Yeah. No, it doesn't mean
that's simple.
Yeah, I'm saying, but it affects.
shot.
No, I'm saying right, but it also affects your character. That means the way your parents conduct themselves and how you're in the house you're raised, it's going to affect your ability to make better choices. If you're raised in a wholesome atmosphere, so let's say a person is raised in a broken home, and he gets married and he says, "No, I want to be a good parent. I don't want to be what my parents were." It's harder for him because he doesn't have the model to look after. It's hard. Don't think he can't. Obviously, he could. Everyone has free choice, and we don't. And this is the fine balance to walk. Everyone has free choice. No one, just because you're born.
In this scenario, where's the levush?
Huh?
I like your metaphor. Where's the levush in this?
We're actually.
He wants a normal family. He was born without it.
So in chapter
Where's
4,
the levush
in
this?
chapter 4, we're going to get into what's called machshava. This is for me.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. We're going to get into machshava dibur mesa, thought, speech, and action. Thought, speech, and action is really a levush because garments are interchangeable, based on how you thought, speech, and action. We're not holding there yet. We're jumping. But the levush quoted in chapter 2 is it's called a levush because it's not your true character, and it's not really interchangeable. It's only levush because it's not the essence of what your character is. It's the ability for the character to express itself. That's why it's called a levush, but it's not really a levush. The word levush means you have the ability to change. It means you can change your character.
And who gives you that? Your parents give you the levush?
Your parents give you the ability to express your character. Now, how you express your character ultimately depends on you.
And you don't know the ability.
No.
You don't know the levush. There's no.
Well, you can tell. You can tell. Sometimes you have a person who loves coming to shul. Some person and loves to
I'm talking
learn.
about in heaven.
Nah.
Yeah, Michael.
No.
There's no. You're not even nefesh, not even neshama. Adam
No.
kadmon. Like,
well, let's not
there's
get.
no part that is
No.
familiar with the lefush.
No. So there's some Jews search out Judaism. Okay? They feel it. Some Jews never search out Judaism, but they find out about something and all of a sudden they're in love. I mean, what happened? Because of the parents, because of the upbringing, that soul was so covered over, and all we needed to do is just to expose them, which is kind of what Chabad we're trying to do. We're trying to expose people to Judaism, to that, because we're going to learn in chapter 8. You're right, that a Jew's natural connection is to Judaism. So we don't have to indoctrinate or introduce. All we have to do is reveal what's already there. But again, so I don't want to confuse end of chapter 2 and chapter 4. Chapter 2 said two things. Number one, the character of your soul, which is decided by God. Number two, and this is not interchangeable. The conduct of the parents affect you. You can't reverse that. The absolute extreme example is a mamzer. You know what a mamzer is? A bastard child. If a woman doesn't get a proper divorce, and she has a child out of wedlock, that child is a mamzer, and you can't marry another Jew. You can only marry a mamzer, and you might say that's not fair. He didn't do anything. You're 100% right. It's not fair, but we're blessed, or we suffer by the conduct of our parents. Which reminds me of a story, by the way. I meant to say it in the last class, but it's very good. Alter Rebbe, Shner Zalman Liadi, he was a great man. I mean, the greatest of the great. His oldest son, Reb Deber, was also, even from he was very young, he was a child prodigy, and he showed a spiritual affinity. He was edel is Yiddish for a refined person, a person that appreciated the finer things in life. I don't mean art and classical music. I mean spirituality, right? One day he was learning, and I guess from the way he was walking and talking, you can see that he felt proud of himself. He was a kid. So a chassid bumps into him. He says, I love the story too. A chassid bumps into him and says, you think you're special because you learned? He says, you know who your parents are? Your parents are the Rebbe and the Rebbe said. You can only imagine how they conducted themselves. And because of the Rebbe, I'm sure they got first dibs on which soul to draw down. And they drew down a soul for you.
It's not that they got first dibs. They knew
Exactly.
Their intentions were to get only the best.
Exactly. And they drew down a soul from the creme de la creme, right? Says, do you know who my father was? My father was a puya. Puya is a farmer. My mother, I don't know if she knew how to read. I don't even want to think about what they were thinking about, all right? By the time it came to choose my soul, you know, the bottom of the barrel is sludge. What do you call the dredge, right? He says, the dregs, my soul is from the dregs, right? So, relax, okay? Get over yourself a little bit. Don't be so full of yourself. So, David, he was a true person. Even from when he was a child, he realized that everything I've accomplished, not thanks to me, it's because all the gifts my parents gave me. So he ran into his father, and he said, I'm a zero. I've accomplished nothing. Everything I've accomplished is you. So, and he was crying. The Rebbe summoned this chassid, and the chassid started shaking in his pants, because, you know, he went and told off the Rebbe's son, you know, and now he's being called into the principal's office, and he said, oh, shoot, you know, he's like, start packing my bags, I'm out. So the Rebbe told him, said, I want to thank you. You turned my barrel, that's what he called him, the barrel. You turned my barrel into a chassid, because the chassid, ultimately, we're going to learn, is in chapter 1920, I think we're on over there, a chassid is a person who works on himself. You're always working on yourself to improve, even if you're born with great, tremendous abilities, right? So it doesn't make a difference. That story kind of personifies the end of chapter 2. Okay, let's get into chapter 3, at least the beginning, because chapter beginning, l'chaim. By the way, as we go into Tanya, the l'chaims are getting more serious.
It's very serious times.
You can imagine once we hit chapter 53, we're gonna have like a beer.
We're gonna have one of those hats with the beards.
Exactly. Well, finally go, right? Yeah.
You're bong it before.
Eric and Chaim were holding you upside
I
down.
told you, you're gonna get the bird.
Yeah.
The freedom phone. That's the come.
Wait, I know some shows they have a what do you call when they refrigerate the barrel?
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, listen, we're listen. If I have to cut out a hole in the counter, that's more important, right?
Or portable one.
They're portable. Okay, so we're going to start off. We'll start off at least chapter 3 in the beginning, and then we're going to continue Mr. Shem next week. So, chapter 1, we have this. We learned there's two souls. We learned there's two souls. There's the animal soul, human soul, which drives us towards impulsive and what we perceive as good and pleasurable. Chapter 2, we learn that Jews have a secondary soul. Now the question. Now the Rebbe is going to explain is it just soul? Like if you look at the sun, it's just sun, right? What's the makeup of the soul? What's the character? What's the character of the soul? The Alter Rebbe is going to explain, and again, this is based on the fact in Kabbalah that a person is considered a world unto himself. So just like in the creation of the world, there's a 10 sfirot. Every world has 10 sfirot, and they are, I'll say it in Hebrew and then in English. There's Chacham Bin Das, which is the intellectual ones. It's also called Seichel. Seichel is intellect. Chacham Bin Das. In this translation is wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. But in learning in other classes, I found a different rabbi who used, I think, a much better translation, which we're going to use from now on. Chachma is conception, Bina is contemplation, and Das application. Okay, we'll get to that, why it's called that in a second. Then there's what's called the Sheva Midas. The Sheva Midas are the 7 emotional character traits. And in the 7, it's really 6 in 1. And those are Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisod, Malchus. Chesed is loving kindness, Gvura is discipline, Tiferes is compassion, Netzach is endurance, Hoid is glory or dignity, that's Malchus. And Yisod is bonding, and then Malchus is sovereignty or dignity. We'll get into that. Most of them we're not going to deal with, generally speaking. We're going to deal with Chabad, a lot, Chachma and Bina. We're going to deal with Chesed and Gevura, a lot, but generally speaking. But Alter Rebbe here in chapter 3 is going to explain the character of the soul. Now, I'm just going to give you a preview from chapter 3, jump ahead to chapter 6. The character he's going to explain in this chapter is not exclusive to the godly soul. This is the character of a soul. So the animal soul and the godly soul both have equal character. Okay? But if I'm using a Hebraic term too often, I'm not explaining, please ask to explain, right? I mean, generally, I would like to try to, if we use the Hebraic term more often, it makes it easier. Okay, ready? Any questions before we begin? No? Good. All right. V'hine like this. Now, kol bechina umadrega mashalosh elu nefesh ruach neshama. Every single, because remember we said there's the soul and how the soul is appreciated. There's a nefesh which is lower, ruach which is second, neshama is third. Kulula, whichever one you're looking at, is made up of Eser Bechinot, 10 levels. Now, it's very important. Note 1 under the line is very important, because it doesn't mean the soul has 10 parts. The soul doesn't have 10 parts. The soul is the soul. It manifests itself so in 10 ways. So if I would say there's Eric, and then there's Eric the way he displays compassion, and then there's the way Eric displays kindness. So is that Eric kindness? Eric, no, it's Eric. Just the way you're expressing yourself. So there's the soul, and then there's the 10 ways the soul expresses itself. Okay, it manifests itself. Because obviously we have to say this because the soul comes from God, just like God is one, so too is the soul. Kamoi, just like we learn in Kabbalah, that every world. Remember, we learned in two classes ago. There's the four worlds: Tzilut, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. The worlds of emanation, creation, formation, and action. So each one of those worlds are made up of 10 levels. They're called the 10 Sefirot. Now the word Sefirot, divine manifestations, doesn't. Sometimes the book doesn't give a definition, because sometimes when you define something and it's not complete, you leave something on the side. It's better not to define it. Huh? Yes. So the word sipur means to shine. This is the way godliness shines. The same way in the world it has it, so too shilishtal shlo mehen. So that's from whence they are derived. They descend. So a person also has these 10, but by us, in a person, it's called Esar Kochot, 10 abilities, 10 character traits. And these are, and before we say what they are, and they're divided into into two categories: intellect and emotion. That's the way. And the question you always have to ask yourself is, who's driving the bus? The intellect or the emotion? They all work in tandem. So for example, I'll say this now, but it's going to come back later many times. In order to have a desire for something, you have to know about it. You can't desire ice cream. Right? I'm sure you cooked a dish or something, like, you can say a dish that I've never heard of. You can ask me, do you like this dish? I can like it or not like it. I don't know what it is. So initially you have to have understanding of knowledge of what it is. Based on that knowledge, your emotions can have an impulse. Oh, I really want ice cream. Then you go back to intellect and think to yourself, how am I going to get ice cream? Okay, so they work in tandem. Intellect and emotion work in tandem. A person who's only intellect is not good. He's a psychopath. A person who's all emotional is not good. What's the word? The guys can't control his emotions. I'm sure there's a medical term for it. It's called a woman. I'm kidding. It was a joke.
Hilarious.
Time to edit another class. You might as well throw an F-bomb. I'm editing it anyway. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
This week. Leave me alone, Rabbi. Come on.
Immediately canceled.
Exactly.
Done.
So no beer bunk competition. We're having so much fun with the guys. Can you imagine how I speak after one
whiskey makes this last way
lachaim?
better.
You should come on Simchas Torah. Anyway, so I'm kidding.
I'm honestly so impressed with that joke that I didn't have time to laugh. That was just such the delivery was
So
smacked me with
intellect and emotion have to work together. We're gonna learn more chapter 13 exactly how that works. But before we get into how they work, let's get into what they are. So the categories are intellect and emotion. The three intellect are called Chachma Bina Das, Chabad. Right? We're called Chabad Lubavitch. Why are we called Chabad? Because the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. This is his book, his whole magnum opus. Is that our job is to utilize our intellect over our emotion, to control our emotion. That's why we're called Chabad. We're not really called Lubavitch. Lubavitch is the name of a town in Russia. But because the movement moved from Liadi to Lubavitch, we were called Lubavitchers. So we're called Chabad Lubavitch movement. Really, it's Chabad.
Wasn't he fleeing Napoleon?
Yes. Yeah, but that was at the end. He died. I mean,
he died while fleeing.
Yeah, he died. He died in the town called Vienna in the winter of 1812. You want to hear a crazy story?
Should we?
After.
Jay's not here.
Listen, you have to go a little.
I should move this way? There you go. Okay, thank you. See? Someone's looking out for me. So, remind me after. I'll tell you a crazy story to Alter Rebbe. This is not related.
Write a note.
This is not related to the class, so we won't say it. So the I feel like, when the guy's reading the teleprompter, pause for applause. So what is Chachma Bina Das? Let's talk about those. Okay, we're going to focus on that tonight, and then afterwards We're not going to get into the seven emotional ones. Let's talk about Chachma bin Adas. What's Chachma? Chachma means, and we're going to explain a little bit more also inside. Chachma means, let's say you're working on a problem, and the idea is, it escapes you, and you're thinking, you can't ask Google, and sometimes you're thinking, how do I solve this problem? ChatGPT, right? Or you make up an answer, right? So, there was a time where when people were reading the Gemara, learning the Gemara, if it didn't make sense, this is 1900, 1100, until a man named Rabbeinu Tam stopped what I'm about to say. If your guy was reading the Talmud, didn't understand it, it doesn't make sense. Cross it, change a word.
This is why they respected the older rabbis. Opinion way worse.
So Rabbeinu Tam, who lived in France in the 1100s.
Who?
Rabbeinu Tam. He was Rashi's grandson. His name was Yaakov ben Meir. Everyone knows him as a Rabbeinu Tam. So he said, that garbage is going to stop right now. You have something to say, you put it on the side, on the margins of the page. You don't change the text. You do that, you're out. And Rabbeinu Tam was the leader of Ashkenazi Jewry. So if you said you're out, you're out. Anyway, so let's say you're working on a problem, and the idea is you don't have it. And anyone who's tried to figure something out, and they've figured it out, there's a moment where, Eureka! I got it! It's a flash of lightning, huh? A light bulb, right? Now, if you remember that moment in your life that it's happened, we don't like to think for ourselves much, and that's why we have the media to tell us how to think. Everyone choose your channel. If after that Eureka moment, that light bulb moment, if you don't continue to think about it, you're going to lose it, because it's just it's a second. You have to continue to internalize it and think about it, and then you can know it. But if someone asks you a question, so you say, guys, I understand it. Okay, so he asks you a question, I don't know. Then you don't really have it. Chachma, conception. What's conception? Conception. At the moment of conception, this is really nothing. It just sperm, egg, nothing's there. Chachma is that eureka moment. I got it. Conception. The idea is conceived in your head. Then after that, you have to take the idea and build on it, and expand on it, and contemplate. Sit on the idea. That's called bina. Bina means to contemplate. So in Kabbalah, a man is chachma, a woman is bina. The man gives the seed, and the woman takes it and expands upon it for 9 months. Contemplates. But this is what I'm about to say. The third idea is really has more to do with the end of the chapter. But then after that comes das. Das means application. Application means when the idea is one with you. Sometimes you can understand an idea, but when someone asks you a question, or someone asks you to put it into your own words, you have a hard time. Now, do you not understand it? You understand it. So how come you can't put it into your own words? How come you can't manipulate the information? Because you don't own it. Das means when you own it. It's a knowledge, but application. When you know something, you can apply it. So I'll tell you a story, a personal story. When I was learning to smicha, rabbinical ordination, so in the beginning, before we get into the code of Jewish law, we learned the Talmud, which the code of Jewish law, Kashrut, is based on. It's one of the more complicated tractates in the Talmud, called Gemara Chulin. All the laws of Kashrut in there. It's rather complex. And there was an idea that we were learning. We were 8 guys, and we were learning, and we didn't get it. So we went to the rabbi, and he explained it, and then we got it. Then the rabbi left because we had to leave, and then we were learning, and we all forgot it again. I don't remember what the idea was. I don't remember exactly what we didn't understand. It's been 20 years, so come on.
Edit this video.
Great
later
story.
on.
But listen.
It's like a Seinfeld episode.
So I remember I was walking outside. I was pacing back and forth because I knew I could understand it because we all understood it. So I was walking back and forth and turning the idea, and all of a sudden I ran into the study hall. I said, "Guys, I got it, but I don't know. I had to go back out and think about it more. I knew I had it, but I didn't have it. So I went outside for another, I don't remember, 20 minutes, and I thought about it, and then I came in and I explained it. I said, guy, I said, okay, yeah. Then he asked me a question. I was like, I don't know, but I understood it. But the rabbi who was our teacher, he came in and he was able to respond to the questions because he owned it. That's das. Chachma is the flash of that eureka, that light bulb moment. Bina is when we work on internalizing it. Das is when we can give it out. We could give it out again. That's why, if you see on page 64 in the old print, it says it's called the three mothers. The three mothers. Why is intellect called the three mothers? Because you can't have an emotion without intellect. You can't. Where are you going? Why are you going backwards? You can't. You're never on top. You're always doing something else. You haven't shown me how I'm wrong today, so you got to find something. Emotion doesn't exist on its own. You can't have an emotion without intellect. It's impossible. You have to know what something is. Right? If I told you some Argentinian food or something you didn't know, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. I'm sure. That you go to South America, you go to Asia, and they have some food. Oh yeah. You know what Marmite is? Good. Don't. Yeah. Marmite is this awful Australian food, which I don't know why. It's made out of yeast.
Vegemite?
Marmite. Yeah, Vegemite. Yeah.
Vegemite.
They have Marmite also. Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
It's made out of yeast. It kind of looks like chocolate spread, but it's bitter. It's bitter, and the Australians go crazy for it. Anyone that doesn't live on that forsaken island, continent, thinks it's the most horrible thing that every person was created. Like now that you have real food, why are you still eating this? You're not in prison anymore, right? So my one of my very good friends, his uncle married an Australian. So his grandfather is Russian. So he comes one day to visit his son, and she was making bread and Vegemite and Marmite, with the and they put on a very thin layer because it tastes like exactly how it looks, right? And he goes, he said, "Can I have a slice?" She says, "Yeah, sure." So she gives him. He's like, "We're not in Russia anymore. Put it on." It's like, yo, here comes your line. It's not 9:30. It's not Tuesday. Alexa, Genesis 1.
Let there be light.
That did it for you?
Exactly.
Exactly. Now, all right, guys,
Great
class is over.
And shoot. Action.
So he takes a bite out of the bread. And says, "People eat this?" He's like, "Well, yeah, people." It's like, okay. I don't think he ever went back to Australia. The point is, you can't have an emotion if you have no knowledge. So intellect is called the mothers. The emotion is called the kefulot. The kefulot are the doubles. Why they call the doubles is because each one corresponds to the other. Although if you look at your Kabbalistic table, you'll see Chachma on the right and Bina on the left, but it's not really right and left. It's really together like this, or maybe like this. Chachma, you can't have Bina, can't have contemplation without conception. They go together. But if you don't have contemplation, you lose Chachma. But in the emotion, you have kindness, discipline, endurance, and dignity, right? So they're called the kefulot because they correspond with each other. And the last thing, and we'll start off chapter 3 again next week, but we're going to tie in next week the 6 days of creation, or the 7 days of creation, with Shabbos, with the 7 emotionals. So when Hashem was creating the world, it was an expression of his 7 emotional attributes. When Hashem created the world, that's kindness, right? On the second day, he laid down borders, split the waters, right? On the third day there was a a balance between water and land. It's compassion, right? And then Netzach is endurance. The sun, the moon, the stars, they go forever, right? And the fifth day, you see all the myriad of creation that brings glory to God, right? And Yisoid is number 6, bonding, foundation. Man was created on the 6th day. That's the world. It's reason. And 7th, God is king, right? So everything ties in to everything. That's one of the things I love about Chassidus, because Chassidus shows how everything in the world is synthesized. Not the material world and the physical world. Everything is united together. So we'll pause now. Any questions? Next week we'll get back to Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Okay, next week Tuesday night. Chaim, do you mind